All right, fellas, welcome back to another episode here with Q&A with TNC. I am Tim, and Christian is once again sitting in the middle of, well, not middle of time, Bangkok, Thailand, and we are 12 hours apart, but we're here to bring you some wisdom, bring you some knowledge, not because we're the smartest guys in the room, but because we feel as though this is what we're called to do. And the purpose of this podcast, if you guys have been following us, really is very simple. We want to tackle some of the most difficult questions. That's why it's called Q&A with TNC. We want to talk about the most difficult topics or the issues that are going on out there in men's lives that are really honestly causing them to fail. And our heart is not for a man to fail. And we believe that men are supposed to be the leaders. They're supposed to be the ones that are creating victory and success and security and all of those pieces where they can eventually have peace in their life. And today we're going to be jumping into a very interesting topic, one that Christian and I deal with on the regular, whether it's right in our face and a man comes to us and says, "Hey, I struggle with this," or it's something that they don't even know exists that they really struggle with. And that is this concept of idol worship. And so I think we need to jump in, Christian, with let's first talk about, okay, what is it? What is an idol, right? We see this all throughout Scripture. What is an idol? What are some examples maybe from Scripture that we can look at and go, oh my goodness, look at the Israelites, or look at, present day Rome when Jesus was walking around. What are the idols that were distracting them during that time? But first, let me kick it to you, Christian. What is, in your opinion, and what you believe to be biblically sound, what are idols?
Oh, that's a great question, Tim. And what's interesting is we have men listening from around the world, and so this question is going to be very unique in the way that it's received by men depending on where they live. So, in
Agreed.
instance, some parts of the world, you'll have men who are like, "Yeah, I know exactly what an idol is. It's a particular height. It's made out of a particular material, and it sits on a particular room in my friend's house."
Well
And yet
said.
other people in other countries are going to be like idols. That's something, that's biblical times. That's nothing I struggle with today.
Mm,
So I think what I try to share with men is, and I love the question, is what is an idol? And I try to keep it simple. I think an idol, or one of the things that I teach and one of the things that I look at in my own life is an idol is anything that keeps me from loving God and loving others, because that's actually what we're called to do, to love God and to love others. So an
two greatest
idol.
commandments.
Right, the two greatest commandments. So what
Hmm.
what is it that has become so important to me that it distracts me from loving God and keeps me from loving others? If you can identify that, if you recognize that there's something in your life like that, that's an idol.
Yeah, no, that's really, really well said. So today we're identifying, and I completely agree with, right. I mean, it's very, very, it's something that is going to, you're putting ahead of God. You're
Right.
putting ahead of maybe your family, putting ahead of your mission, right? Like, we're not here to tell you that recreation and doing things that you enjoy, doing things that are maybe an outlet for you are wrong. We're not saying that. We're saying that what happens to a man many times is that the idol in their life begins to get ahead of taking care of their family, begins to get ahead of worshiping God, begins to get ahead of taking care of their children, begins to get ahead of their provision that they're supposed to be providing for their household. And I completely agree with you. I think that the two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength,
Hmm.
and then you love your neighbor as yourself. Right? Jesus just came made
Right.
that clear. He understood the
Yep.
Shema. The Shema was very much so, this is what we're supposed to do. He came as a Jewish rabbi, but then he flipped the script oftentimes. He said the second commandment is just as important:
That's
love your
right.
neighbor as yourself, right? And
That's right.
so idol worship or idolatry, and I love the idea that you said, which is great. It depends on where you are in different
Hmm.
parts of the world, but I do think that the one that we're going to talk about today, because I think the next kind of, I would say, 3 or 4 episodes are going to be on what do these different idols look like?
Hmm.
How are they relevant across the world? And the one that we're going to talk about today is a pretty big one, right? Because I think every single man across the globe is interested in sports
I
as a
call it
hobby.
I call it the idol of fall, the idol of the fall season. Yes.
That's great.
Sports, the fall idol. Hmm.
The fall idol.
Yes.
And so we talk about sports, we talk about entertainment, we talk about hobbies. So all of these kind of run in the same, circles, if you will, because a sport can be a hobby that entertains you. right? And all of a
Mm.
sudden, and I know this from my life. I played sports my entire life, and it was entertaining. It was my hobby. It was what I was committed to. And many times in my life, Christian, it was above God. God was like a supplement to it. Like, hey, I'm going to go out and be the absolute best baseball player I can be. And God, if you want to come along for the ride, that's great. Well, that was wrong. That was wrong, right? And it didn't make any sense in the long run when I step back and look at it because I didn't have peace in that process oftentimes. And imagine thinking, thinking to yourself, if the hobby is going to, the hobby that's the idol is going to rob you of your peace, then something's wrong, right? And what do you think about that
Right.
from an international perspective? Tell me.
Well, I can imagine a man sitting here listening to this particular episode right now, and he's thinking to myself, now wait. I'm not supposed to be a monk, and I just can't be working 24/7. I've
That's
got to
right.
have things that are my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There's
100%.
nothing wrong with passion. If you're playing baseball and that's your passion, go for it. Now, that might
Yep.
not be my passion. My passion might be something else. Could be
Golf.
underwater basket weaving. My
That's right.
passion is something else. But there's nothing wrong with passions. There's nothing wrong with hobbies. There's nothing wrong with sports, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment. But where we find ourselves going down a path towards idolatry is when, like you said, those things become so important that we neglect not only our earthly responsibilities, but our spiritual responsibilities as well. And the
Well
spiritual
said.
responsibility is to steward what God has called us to do, which is to love
Mm-hmm.
Him, to steward who God has called us to reach out to, which is to love others, and to steward everything that He has given us so as to bring honor and glory to Him. So if I'm using hobby, sports, or entertainment as a way to neglect my responsibilities, it might have become an idol. If I'm
Yeah.
using hobby, sports, or entertainment to as an excuse to not steward well my emotions, my time, my activities, my money, my relationships, then again it has become a potential idol in my life. So I think men need to understand we're not saying that you need to be alone in your room, sitting down, meditating 24 hours a day. Not at all. Live your
Yeah.
life, do what is fun and passionate, in those moments where you need to take those times to relax or to enjoy company with others. But it's very, very important that Proverbs 4:23 shows us, guard your heart, for out of it comes the wellspring of life. And an idol is anything
Yeah.
that wants to take root in your heart that can distract you, disrupt you, derail you, and deceive you away from
Mm.
loving God and loving others. Again, the two greatest commandments. Your purpose on earth as a man is not to go around cheering from October to February for your favorite cheesehead. That could be something that brings you happiness,
Sure.
but it's not something you will find fulfillment in. Same
Yeah.
thing. There's
Well
nothing
said.
wrong. There's nothing wrong with entertainment, and especially we live in a very entertaining type of society today. But when entertainment becomes the primary focus and it causes us again to not love God and to not love others, then you've made entertainment not only your idol but your priority and your focus. And the same
Yeah.
thing with hobbies or sports. So I think there's a fine line that our listeners need to understand is we're not being legalistic. We're not saying life isn't supposed to have experiences and memories and fun
Of
times.
course.
What we are
Completely agree.
saying is Proverbs says, guard your heart. And if the enemy
Yeah.
can't cause you to fall with sexual sin or power trip or being a bad steward or gambling or loss of money or the big three that all men struggle with or most men struggle
Yeah.
with, then he's going to find side paths. He's going to find other areas to try to get you to walk away from that, again, most important command given to us from God. Love me, love others.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great because I do agree with that 100%. I think that men are built in such a way where we need outlets, right?
Yeah,
We need that
right.
rest. We need that ability to, uh, decompress, to um, get our,
Relax.
relax exactly so that we can be refreshed, so
Hmm.
that we can then continue in the mission, right? And
Hmm.
whatever that looks like, maybe that is a sport. Like I know tons of men, great Christ followers, that they go into sports. They go play on softball teams. They get involved in golf leagues. They get involved in
Yeah.
basketball leagues, but it's for the purpose of number one, disciplining their body, right, for exercise purposes, and number two, because that's how they decompress. My personal accountability partner, I would give him a hard time because he's not much of a rester. He's
Mm.
a go, 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 go. He's this guy that'll go work a 9, 10 hour day and then he'll go home and he'll lay pavers for another 4 hours. And I'm like, who are you? Like, how does this, but we all know those people, those guys
Right.
that are just go, 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 go,
Right.
go.
They
And so
have
we
high
read a book one
capacity
time.
for
Oh,
activity.
they
Hmm.
have unbelievably high capacity. I can't remember the author of the book. But the book is called Running on Empty. Great book. And it really, we went through it together because I said to him, I said, hey, listen, I think we need to have a discussion here to make sure you're not burning out. And because he actually did, he got to the point of burnout where he got sick. He wasn't taking care of himself,
Hmm.
and then it lasted like a month. He was in and out of it was a whole thing, right? But the point of what I'm trying to get across here is that you can be on the opposite spectrum of this, right? You can have healthy sports hobbies. You can do all of that in a way that is honoring and that is going to bring you the rest you need and you're not going over the line. But then you can also be on the other side of that. And you kind of touched on this, right? You can be on the other side of it where it's all work and you're going
Hmm.
100 miles an hour and then you're
Right.
burning out, right? So
Right.
it's this
Right.
great important balance that a man has to have in their life. And like, hey, listen, if you need to go get a round of golf in with your friends that are going to be encouraging to you, now don't go get a round of golf with the guys that are going to drink and are going to pull you away, right?
Right.
But
Right.
go do it with the guys that are going to have encouragement for you, that you're going to be able to get rest in, that you're going to make you a better follower of God, going to make you a better dad at home, going to make you a better husband. Um, and that's truly what this is about, really, at the end of the day. And we think about this even in Jesus's time, like for the purpose of going and decompressing. That was the whole purpose of the Sabbath. That was the whole purpose of Shabbat. Go and have relationship. Some people sit there and they didn't. It's hard sometimes to understand. You're supposed to rest. You're supposed to rest. Well, yes, that is true, but God didn't need to rest. He still doesn't need to rest. He's God. It was about relationship. How can you stop, focus on your relationship with me, do no work so that you can make sure that you are getting ready to go for the week? And I think it's funny when you actually look at Jewish culture, what they believe, and what I think we need to do a little bit better in the Christian church, in my opinion, is that they believe that the Sabbath is actually the beginning of their week, not the end, the beginning of their week. So the rest gets them charged up to go run for the kingdom for the rest of the week. And I think we need to do that as men when we think about our hobbies, our sports, our entertainment. Let it be rest. Listen, I love sitting on the couch with my boys and watching football games with them.
Right.
Does it build
Right.
relationship? It does, right?
Well, it does.
But if
It
the
does
house
build
is if the house is
relationship.
burning
Right.
down, I'm not, like things are stopping. I'm turning
Right.
the TV off.
Right. I think another thing is I love what you said. Is it okay to sit with your boys and watch football? And of course it is. Although my encouragement would be it depends on what team you're watching. But
Of course, naturally, I knew you'd say that.
right, it depends on what team you're watching, whether it's a good thing or not. But all joking aside, I think also one of the ways that a particular hobby, sport, or entertainment is becoming an idol is when you use it as a way of escape or withdrawal.
Mm.
Now, I know guys who will. I'm thinking of one man in particular somewhere in the world. The world's 200 countries, so it's a big place, and he would use sports as a way to disengage from relationship. You
Oh, that's
know,
no good. Yeah,
he's like, my life is hard at home. I'm going to disengage. Now, I understand people who have relationship issues. They maybe they need time to process. They maybe need time
sure,
to cool down. But ultimately, you
sure.
come back and seek reconciliation and hopefully
Agreed.
restoration.
Agreed.
But also, I know so many men, and myself included, in the past, we use it as a way to escape reality and a way to
Mm.
withdraw from tough moments, situations, or experiences. And
Yeah,
again, that's where it can become an idol, because what does God ask us to do? He asks us to reconcile and to restore.
yeah,
And so we have to be careful that we don't escape. And of course, we're talking about hobby, sports, entertainment, but porn is a form of distraction and escape.
100%.
Substance
Yep,
abuse is a form of distraction and escape. And I've met men
yep.
before who are like, well, look, it's better for me just to leave the house and go hang out at the bar and watch the rugby classic or whatever, better than
Yeah.
me yelling at my wife and exploding and potentially doing something that I regret. And I'm like, yes, in a way
However,
that's true. You don't want to explode and become violent or something. But
absolutely.
what you don't want to do is withdraw and escape, because all that does is serve as a distraction and a barrier. And instead of working through what you need to work through, you don't develop the skill necessary to have healthy relationships, either with God or with others. And so that's just something I wanted to throw out there, but I'd love to hear your
I
feedback
love
on
it.
that. Have you ever seen men not only use it as an idol, but as a form of escape or withdrawal?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I live in America. There is
I don't know what
tons
that
of
means.
distraction for men, right?
Yeah.
It's because you live in Thailand, bro. There is tons of distractions, right? And the enemy is going to try to get after men in many different ways, going to try to distract them in many different ways, right? I mean, we could talk about, I know we're talking about sports, hobbies, and entertainment, right? So let's just stick with those. The obsession, and I remember being in church one time, and one of the pastors said, it's easy for you as a man, he's talking to our men's group, to yell and scream at a Tampa Bay Bucks game, but
Hmm.
man, you won't go sing praises to God. And he was getting on these guys, right? And he was really laying into them a little bit and just saying, what is going on here?
Right.
Like, and part of it's because it's so acceptable, if you will, to go and yell and scream at a sports game, but for you to get really fired up and passionate about God, it almost is awkward. Is this really what I'm supposed to do as a
Hmm.
man? And so it's been my experience when I think about, uh, you have to fight against those, man. You really have to fight against those distractions, and you have to understand your own individual capacity to deal
Hmm.
with, what are you going to take on? What is truly going to bring you rest? Because I oftentimes see, and I honestly think, that there's just so many opportunities out there, even just in sports and hobbies and entertainment, to get you distracted, and for it to like you said, it goes on the other side of being, therapeutic, to now it's an escape, to now it's what I
Right.
run to now
Right.
it's almost like an addiction, if you will,
Right.
right?
But it's an
And
addiction that doesn't have like serious consequences. And I think that's why a lot of men don't even see it
agreed.
like that. Right. It's like, okay,
Correct.
if I go to substance abuse, either I could get into an accident if I'm driving behind a car, or I could go to
Yep.
prison if I cause something even more serious.
Correct.
And yet
Correct.
with something like this, we don't ever see it as an addiction or as an idol because there's no necessarily negative consequence right off the bat to kind of shock us away from it.
Yeah,
Right.
it's one of the greatest deceptions of the enemy, right? If I can just distract a man away from his primary responsibilities, then man, I can affect his marriage, I can affect his parenting, I can affect his legacy now, because
Hmm.
all of a sudden, if the NFL is on Sundays and I shut down my life as a dad between 1 and 10 p.m. because the games are on, and now they're on even earlier than that sometimes when they're playing in London, right? So I'm watching football for an entire day and I'm neglecting responsibilities, or even worse, I'm upset if I get interrupted because this is my
Hmm.
time. I'm being selfish. Man, that's when it's turned into an idol, where it's like, I need to step away from this. I need to pause because my son needs something, my daughter needs something, my wife needs some help. A neighbor comes over. I mean, let's think about it tangibly, right? My neighbor comes over, hey, can I have a hand with something? It doesn't matter what that looks like. I'm cleaning out my garage. Can you help me pick something up? You know, it, the commandment's simple, like, and we don't have a really good reason not to, especially in today's day and age. You hit pause and then you speed through the rest of the commercials, and so having this check on you, really is important. And what I go back to a lot of times, Christian, and I'd like to get your feedback on this too, is your hobbies and this stuff, that you're getting yourself into, or sports entertainment that's becoming an idol. It's doing two very dangerous things. Number one, it's taking you away from what you're supposed to be doing as a man in your household and leading effectively, but it is absorbing your time. And time is in my opinion, the most important asset you have as a man. And so it is very, very important for you to realize, as you step back from this, one of the biggest things you can do, one of the biggest litmus tests you can have, on idols, is how much time is it taking?
Oh,
What
that's a
is
very
this
good
time
question.
commitment looking like?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
Because
and
ultimately
yeah.
that's it.
Well, we
Go
have to
ahead.
look at time as something to steward, right?
100%.
Everything, and actually, I have an idea for season two now, but everything that God gives us, we have to steward. So you have to steward.
100%.
God gives time, steward it. God gives energy,
Mm-hmm.
steward your activity. God gives air, steward your
Right.
right, just steward everything.
Yep.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that because I can imagine a man saying, "So wait a minute. You haven't told me how do I know the difference?" And so
Yeah.
let me give you an example from my life. I like to watch Atlanta Braves baseball. Okay. Grew up as a Braves fan. I remember when they went from worst to first back in the 90s.
Oh
Okay. They
yeah,
were awful with Dale Murphy.
Glavin,
God bless
Smoltz,
him. And they became amazing. And
Avery,
you had,
David
oh, Avery.
Justice.
Right. Ron Gant, right? I mean, you had
You
Fred
can
McGriff,
tell it was
Jerry
an idol in my
Pendleton.
life for a while.
Oh, yeah. It's, the best team of the 90s. Only one World Series. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But
Yeah,
God's still good. So a guy might say, well, look, so you're telling me I can't do this. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is there's a time to recharge, to rest, to just take some time for yourself. Nothing wrong with that.
balance.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a blend of time and responsibility. For me to sit and watch 3 games in a row is probably not the best stewardship of my time or the best
Great word.
stewardship of my relationship. See,
Yep.
as man, everything you've been given, you are to steward. And if you don't trust me on that, what does God tell Adam in the very beginning? I'm placing you in the garden to take care of it, which is another word
Tend
for
and watch over
steward,
it.
to tend and
Absolutely.
watch over. So, is
Mm-hmm.
there a time where you need to steward your own energy and your own refreshment? Of course, go for it. Watch a baseball
Yeah.
game. Watch 4 or 5 innings.
Yep.
But does it become an idol again, like you said, when you sit down 7 or 8 hours and you have to watch every NFL game on every channel, so that
That's right.
somehow you think that you're going to become the next coach of the San Francisco 49ers, which you're not.
That's right.
So, but then that leads me to another question, Tim, because you're in America, and I've got to
Yeah,
ask
let's
you
hear
this
it.
question: is it not an idol? Let's dialogue because I don't want to get any hate mail here. What do you think about
I think we're
parents
going to
who
get some
put,
no matter what.
what do you think about those families that put a priority on weekend sports over church?
Oh boy, man, you're hitting it home here too, because I have an 8-year-old son who we do travel ball, right? And
Hmm.
that travel ball sometimes puts us in a position where we're like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about church? And you have nailed it, man.
And that
Here's the
might have to
thing.
be another episode, but I want to talk
Yeah,
about it
yeah.
because that's
Well,
huge in
no,
America, right? You've got
it
you've got the you've
is.
got the
It
polo,
is.
you've got the soccer, you've got
So
the
here's the
baseball, you've
thing.
got the basketball, you got it all. And the
Correct.
family might not go to
Correct.
church for 4 weeks in a row.
Correct. So here's the thing. Um,
Tell us.
you have to look at what's the goal of the team. Okay. And we kind of, my wife and I talked about this, and we really drew some lines in the sand, and we said to ourselves, okay, if one of our children is talented enough, let's just
Mhm.
say both my wife and I were college athletes, talented enough to go to college. Okay. That's going to really start being important later on in their development, not at 8, 9, 10. Right. Like, yes, those are important, but let's focus on the foundation. And so what we always said is we're not going to join a team that doesn't have the values we share. Now, by the grace of God, what occurred in our life is we saw out of our normal recreation league, which is like your normal town league of Little League Baseball or whatever you want to call that, or a Cal Ripken league. We saw a group of men that were all believers kind of begin to form and have this idea that we could create a team that would be a Christian based team. Psalm 127:4, like ours in the hands of a warrior, our children born in one's youth. That's our Bible verse that we based everything off of. And we knew that we could bring these boys together, that we could do it in a way that was going to put God first, that was going to do chapels and Bible studies on the regular. We're going to teach them how to be young men of God. We're going to have them memorize scripture. We're going to, yeah, we actually, my wife and I bought some framed armor of God scriptures for them to hang on their wall at the end of the season. And God blessed it. Christian, He did. He blessed us with a record of 49, 3-1. And what
That's
happened
amazing.
is team after team after team would come up to us, their coaches, and say, man, how did these kids get so good? And we get to return the glory to God every single time. So we turned it into a witness. So that's my story, right? But that's not everybody's story. And so how do you balance then making sure that your relationship with God is still a priority? For us, we're kind of spoiled. We go to a big church in Tampa, Florida called Grace Family. Love the church. The church has 8 locations, tons of different service times, and so we make it a priority. And would there be a weekend or two where we missed it? Yes, but we go on, we watch it online. Our kids sit down, they do their portion of it. We make it work. And where there's enough technology out there, we never allow our kids to believe that this trip we're going to, or this team we're participating in, or this game that we're playing this weekend is more important than our relationship with God. It doesn't take us away from our mission. We're going to do our mission while we're there, but we're still going to honor God in the process. So there is a way to balance it. Does it take more effort? Absolutely. Is that more difficult for me to lead my family in a situation where we're traveling on the weekends with 4 kids and we're going to these baseball games? Yes, but when we could do it in a way that was going to reach unchurched people, and let me tell you, there are a lot of unchurched people in the in the youth sports world,
Sure,
right?
sure.
We could walk around with a Bible verse in the back of our shirt where they could see the success God was giving us. And it led to many, many, many conversations with other people on other teams, with other kids. I mean, it was a huge blessing. It was our first time we did it this past season, but it's all about priorities, right? The number one thing I can recommend to that is you got to pick the right coach. Because at the end of the day, if you need to miss a game because you're going to your church or you're going to be sure that you're honoring God with your time, he better be okay with that. She better be okay with that. And if not, maybe it's time to find a different team. Maybe it's time
Yeah.
to reconsider what you're doing.
See,
Because
and
at
I
the end of
think,
the day, that's God's
yeah.
blessing will come by honoring that, or God's
See,
discipline will
yeah.
come. Let's just call it what it is.
See, and I think this is why the topic of idols is such a man. I think it's going to take us through the rest of season one, because
Agreed.
there's the clarity of what an idol is, but there's the nuance of what idolatry is,
Oh man, you got to go expound on
right?
that.
Well, I think that's going to have to be the next episode, because again, there's going to be people who look at this and be like, okay, you're either really legalistic and you're telling me I can't do anything,
Yep.
or you're trying to justify everything that you're doing so that you feel better about yourself. There's two extremes. What we're
Yeah,
trying to
I
find is
agree.
the middle, saying
Agreed.
anything can become an idol if
Yeah.
and when it leads you to not love God, to be distracted in loving God and loving others,
Yep.
or if it takes you away from the command to steward everything. You're to be a
Dude, I
good
could.
steward.
Yeah,
And you've hit this before, Tim. It's all about stewardship. I don't know if
it
you've used
is.
that word, but you live a life like that already. You're stewarding what God has given you in your marriage, in your
Got
children,
to.
in your work, in your ministry. So you're living out stewardship.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, none of us, I don't think any man would not raise their hand and be like, I know what an idol is. But I think all of us
Yeah.
would feel uncomfortable if we have to identify the nuance of when I fall into the line of idolatry. When
I
has
think that's
something
great.
become idolatry? And to give our friends and listeners a tidbit, a little preview of the next episode, we're going to be talking about politics, the idol of
Mm.
politics, the
The
potential
timing is
idol that
unbelievable.
politics can be. So either we're
It's
going to increase our audience, or this is the end of season one forever. And so we're going to find out on our next episode. But yeah, I
I love
think
it.
we'd love to hear from guys. I think I would just want to wrap up my part and say, look, I have hobbies. Golf is a hobby. Unfortunately, I wasn't given the talent of Tiger Woods, but
That's
golf
right.
is a hobby. I love
Yeah. Same with
sports.
me.
People heard me say I love watching the Atlanta Braves. I love it.
Yep.
It's a sport that I enjoy. I enjoy watching golf on TV. Some people say they'd rather watch paint dry. I think golf is more exciting.
Agreed.
And I love entertainment. You put on a great documentary from the Discovery Channel or National Geographic, and I'm there to watch it.
Yep.
Those aren't bad in and of themselves.
Correct.
But what place do they have in my heart? What place do they have in my life? And what place do they have in my relationship? And as you said,
I
Tim,
love it.
each of us are different, but none of us are blind to where we know when it becomes an idol in our life. We might not call
Yeah.
it an idol, but
That's right.
we know when our life is dictated by one of those three things. And if your
Yeah.
life is dictated, if your decisions are dictated by a hobby, a sport, or entertainment, ask God for his opinion.
Yeah.
Ask God to give you his thoughts, and then do what he says. And that would
Yeah.
be my encouragement. Back to you.
I love it. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, guys, it's I couldn't have said it better, so I'm really not going to add too much to what Christian just said, and we're going to jump into a very hot topic on our next episode, which is politics. And it's a hot topic because it's made a hot topic. It's a hot topic because our world produces it as a hot topic because the importance put on that, oftentimes, in my opinion, not to get ahead of ourselves in the next, but there's too much importance put on that. And idolatry, we just want to make sure our heart for you as men is that idolatry isn't something that is going to lead you to destruction, that idolatry isn't going to replace God, that you can have outlets that are going to be healthy, that are going to make you better. So hear our heart, right? It's not that we don't want you to have outlets, not that we don't want you to have things that you're passionate about, because every man can step back and go, you know what? There's men that have done this right. The Tim Tebows of the world, right? Then the Scotty Schefflers of the world, to make the golf reference. These
Yep.
guys that do this right, and they have a blessed life because of it. But there's also a lot of men that do this wrong, and they've experienced discipline. So everybody, we really appreciate you tuning in to the Q&A with TNC podcast. And to wrap things up, Christian, appreciate you. Enjoy your 12 hours ahead of me in Thailand.
I can tell
And
you
we'll catch.
the day's looking good, Tim. The day's looking good.
That's good. You're about to go to sleep, man. That's right. My day's ahead of me.
The day's looking good. It's a good day today, Tim. Yeah,
Awesome.
everyone, we're looking forward to next week, your next episode, and thank you for tuning in.
Yep. We'll catch you next time.